welcome back to this section of learning life science. We're starting with the topic DNA, the code of life. Mind you, this topic is found in paper 2, which is 27 marks. So before you focus on what is DNA, let me take you back to knowing, or just a recap, a reminder of the plant cell and the animal cell, the structure of the cell. This is what we do in grade 10. So you just need to know the structure of the cell. Remember, we have two types of cell. We have a plant cell and an animal cell. So these are the diagrams to show the animal cell and the plant cell. But we are mainly, when we talk about the DNA, the code of life, we are mainly concerned about, mostly you find out that we will be concerned about the nucleus, and also we'll be concerned about the ribosome. And also there are other parts where we find the DNA. So this is just a recap on the animal cell and the plant cell. So now let's move on to the structure of the nucleus. The structure of the nucleus. This again is just a recap to show what exactly do we find in the nucleus. What exactly do we find in the nucleus? What exactly do you find in the nucleus? And we are going to now go into deep details about the functions of the nucleus and where we find the DNA. How does it occur in the nucleus? Right. We now we've seen the structure of the nucleus. We've seen this is the nuclear envelope, because you might be asked to label. You have the nuclear pole, nucleoplasm, chromatin, a nucleolus, endoplasmic reticulum. So you find out that in biological terms, you might be asked, what is a chromatin? What is a nucleus? These are some of the terms that comes asking you to define these terms. Right, okay. Okay, now let's go on to the actual part that we want to talk about today, which is the structure of the nucleus, where we find DNA, where we explain what exactly the code of life, what is happening there. Right, we start with the function. We start with the function. Right. The first point says the nucleus controls all activity of the cell. The nucleus controls all activity of the cells. So which means all the activities that are happening in the cells are controlled by the nucleus. So which means it's the center of all the activities that happen in the cell. Then the second point said it transmits hereditary characteristics from the parent to the offspring. Transmit hereditary characteristics from the parent to the offspring, since the chromosomes store the genetic material of the cell. Right, we want to go on to check exactly what is a chromosome. Right, if you can check on my diagram here, you're given an example of a chromosome there. Right, so in other words, we're saying the chromosomes occurs. The chromosomes, these chromosomes, they occurs in the nucleus of every living cell. So every living cell has the chromosome, this chromosome, the chromosome. Every living cell has the chromosome. So it occurs in the nucleus of every living cell, the chromosome, right? So what does it have? The chromosomes, it occurs in every living cell. So we find it in the nucleus. That's why we're given the structure of the nucleus there on top, right? So what does the chromosome do? This one now consists of a DNA molecule. it consists of a DNA molecule. If you see this diagram, again, we're talking about this diagram. So which means this chromosome, this diagram is the DNA. We're talking about the DNA here. So we are saying this chromosome consists of a DNA molecule. So a DNA molecule is coiled around proteins. There are proteins here. It's coiled around proteins. It's coiled around proteins called the histones. It's called around proteins called the histones, right? Histones, right? It's called around proteins called the histones, right? So we have various DNA segments in each chromosome. We have various DNA segments in each chromosome strands known as gene. Okay. So these DNA segments are now known as a gene. That's why we are saying it transmits hereditary characteristics from parent to offspring, because here we have various DNA segments in each chromosome. So in these chromosomes, we will be having various DNA segments known as the gene. So that's when we go on to our point number 2, which says it transmits hereditary characteristics. Right. So as you can see, this is the structure of the nucleus. From above, we've seen the diagram of the structure of the nucleus, and there we have the structure of the nucleus shown here. So we have the chromosome here, we have the DNA that is called in histones, then we have the gene, so which means these are segments of the DNA. Right, now let's move on to nucleic acids. What exactly are the nucleic acid? Because we need to differentiate. Remember, we have two types of nucleic acid. We have two types of nucleic acid. So let's move on to the nucleic acid, and we want to just check out exactly what is the nucleic acid and what is the difference between the nucleic acid that we have. Right, the first one is the DNA. We have the DNA, right? We have DNA and RNA, right? So what is it made of? Right, it is made of the nucleotides. So when we're talking about the nucleotide, if you check very well here, this is what we are calling the nucleotide, right? This is what we're calling the nucleotides here. We have this shape. Okay, so we are calling this a nucleotide, where we are having the sugar, we are having the right. So we are having the nucleotide is a building block. So we are saying what exactly make up the DNA? What exactly make up the RNA? Okay, before we are only talking about DNA, what exactly is the DNA? What exactly is the DNA? Right, that's the question we have now. Right. We are saying we have two types of nucleic acid. We have the first one, which is DNA. So we can always say DNA, but what exactly is DNA? What does DNA stand for, right? So we are saying DNA stands for D. It stands for deoxy, deoxyribo, ribonucleic nucleic acid, right? Deoxyribonucleic acid, and RNA stands for ribonucleic acid. Nucleic acid. Right. So we have deoxyribonucleic acid, and then we have ribonucleic acid. Right. That's what this means. Okay. Right. Now we are saying they are building blocks. That is the monomer, the makeup. The makeup of DNA is called nucleotides. The makeup of DNA is called nucleotides. So what exactly is a nucleotide? What are we talking about when we're talking about the nucleotides? When we're talking about a nucleotide, we are talking about here, if we check very well, here, let me start with this nucleotide. Here, circle this one. So look at the shapes here. So this, because it's a DNA, we have two different characteristics here of nucleic acid. We have a DNA and we have an RNA here. So this, because it's a DNA, so we have this, which looks like a circle. Let's talk about the shape. Looks like a shape. The circle is called phosphate. This is phosphate, right? Because the nucleotide contains the phosphate, right? This one is a phosphate, right? Phosphate. Then we have this, which looks like a pentagon, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sides. Because it's a DNA, it's called deoxyribose. Deoxyribose sugar. This is a sugar. Then this is a nitrogenous base. This is a nitrogenous base. And in this case, this is A, which means it's adenine. We are going to focus on this again next. This is A, which means this is adenine. So we have the building block, which is called a nucleotide. Similarly, on the RNA, we still have a building block, this being the phosphate. But now the difference is on the sugar. On the RNA, the sugar is now called the ribose sugar. It's now called the ribose sugar. It's now called the ribose sugar. Right. So if we check here on the nitrogenous base, here we have adenine. If you check very well, this nitrogenous base, these nucleotides goes in pair, they are paired. So A goes with T, G goes with C. So we're saying adenine goes with thymine, guanine goes with cytosine. A goes with T, G goes with C. Now, if you check here again, A, we have A, G, U, C. So when it's an RNA, the thymine here is now replaced by uracil. I want you to get me right. When it's DNA, A goes with T. But when it's RNA, we don't have thymine in RNA. We have what we call uracil, U. So on nitrogenous base, when it's an RNA, on on thymine, we replace it with uracil. That's the difference between DNA and RNA. Okay, right. I hope you get me right here. I hope you get me right here. Right, let's move on to see the nucleotides that we were talking about. Let's move on to see the nucleotides that we were talking about. Now it's been shown very well in form of the shapes that we were talking about. Shown very well in the form of the shapes that we're talking about. You see this one that looks like a circle is the phosphate group. Then the one that looks like a pentagon, that's the sugar. So you know that when it's a DNA, it's a deoxyribose sugar, and when it's RNA, it's the ribose sugar. Then we have a nitrogenous base. We have nitrogenous base. nitrogenous base, that's when we have adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine. Right, let's move on to here. Both nucleic acid, DNA, and RNA share 3 nitrogenous bases. So, which means these 3 nitrogenous bases, adenine, cytosine, and guanine, are found both in DNA and RNA. What is not shared is thymine. What is not shared is thymine. So, which means in other ways, we are saying, as much as we say this, they share, but now on DNA, we'll be having a thymine. Then on RNA, we have uracil. So which means when it's RNA, you substitute thymine with uracil. Where we find thymine in DNA. But when it's RNA, it's now uracil. I hope you understand that. Right. So this is the structure of the nucleotide, as we said before. You can see that's a phosphate sugar. That's a phosphate group. Then that's sugar. That's nitrogenous base. And the nitrogenous base that we have the nitrogenous base that we have guanine, cytosine, adenine, thymine, and then uracil. Right. So remember, we said these things we pair. We usually say, for you to remember, we usually say, all teachers get chocolate. We'll say, all teachers get chocolate. So we are saying all teachers get chocolate. So all teachers, so that you remember, get chocolate. All teachers get chocolate. Meaning we are saying A goes with T, teachers. Get goes with C, chocolate. O teaches A, meaning adenine, right? T, thymine. G, guanine or guanine, right? And C, cytosine. Right? So this is DNA. So when it's RNA now, that's when we substitute the thymine with uracil. When it's RNA, that's when we substitute the thymine with uracil. Okay, right. Now we move on to DNA location and the structure. We move on to DNA location and the structure. Right, just want you to have a quick look on this one. Just wanted to have a quick look on this one. 80, the base pairing. Just want you to have a look on this one. The base pairing we are seeing there. We have A goes with T. We have A goes with T, which means adenine goes with thymine. If you check the base pairing there, adenine goes with thymine, adenine goes with thymine. Here we have thymine, then thymine is pairing with adenine. Then here we have cytosine is pairing with guanine. We have guanine here is pairing with cytosine. Adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine. Thymine, adenine, thymine, cytosine, guanine. So A, T, O teaches G, C, get chocolate. That's how you pair your DNA. And you know that when it's RNA, you substitute a thymine with uracil. So in other ways, as we said before, that these three, adenine, guanine, and cytosine, they are shared, right? Okay, now let's move on to the location. The location of DNA. Right, DNA is located in 3 locations, right? Usually the first one is nucleus. Then this one, mitochondria and chloroplast. So this one we are seeing is extra. Right, extra nucleus. Then this one is the extracellular nucleus DNA. So we have nucleus. These are because the question might ask, set 3 places where we'll find DNA. You should name nucleus, that's the first one, mitochondria, and then chloroplast. Right. So being the case, that's when we have 3 types of DNA, 3 types of DNA. We have nuclear DNA, mitochondrial DNA, and chloroplastic DNA. It's chloroplastic because it's found in the chloroplast. Then this is nuclear DNA because it's found in the nucleus. Then we also have mitochondrial DNA because it's found in the mitochondria. Okay, right. So now let's quickly go to the brief history of DNA. There are scientists who discovered the DNA molecule. So these are the people that you've asked. They will ask you. We have the first one is Rosalind Franklin and her assistant Maurice Wilkins. They researched the structure of DNA. Those are the first that researched the structure of DNA using X-ray diffraction images. That was Rosalind and Maurice Wilkins. Right. So then we have Watson and Crick. They did an independent research. Watson and Crick, they did an independent research upon seeing Franklin. So they developed the research. It was independent though, but upon seeing Franklin's image, they proposed a 3D double helix model, which is the structure that we are talking about in on the DNA and in today. Right, so that was 1953. So then we move on to 1962, where we have Watson and Crick. They received the Nobel Prize for discovery of the structure of DNA. And then Wilkins received an award for his X-ray photograph. So this is just a summary that you need to know about the brief history of the DNA structure. This is the summary that you need to know about the brief history of the DNA structure, right? So you might ask, why is it that Franklin was not honored? Because Franklin was the one that researched on the DNA. By that time, they said, research said Franklin was not honored because she died in 1958. They said she died in 1958 because of cancer at the age of 37. So that's why she was not honored. By the time in 1962, where Watson and Crick received the Nobel Prize. Right. So this is the brief history of the discovery of the DNA. Now let's move on to the structure of the DNA. Let's move on to the structure of the DNA. Right. The DNA is a double-stranded molecule, right? If you check very well this diagram, we are saying double-stranded molecule. Double-stranded, which means it is the strand that are coiled. They are double. So we're saying, so whenever you're answering your questions, there are some certain terms that you should not leave when you're answering. Like you see, it's even highlighted in red. These are the marks. These are the points that are needed by the examiner. DNA is a double-stranded molecule. Then its natural shape is double helix. Double helix, that's the structure. DNA, double-stranded molecule, its natural shape is double helix. Okay, right. Then it is made up of, we talked about the nucleus, so we're saying it is made up of monomers called the nucleotides, right? We're not talking about the monomers, we are talking about these nucleotides, talking about this one, right? They are made of monomers that are called nucleotides. Yes, then each nucleotides of DNA has the following components. We have the deoxyribose sugar, that is the DNA, then we have a phosphate group, then we have the nitrogenous base. So you are stating the a DNA structure. So you said made up of monomers, the double-stranded, double helix structure. Then you talk about the nucleotides consist of deoxyribose, sugar, phosphate, right? Then you talk also about these species are complementary because we are saying, as we said before, that adenine goes with thymine, guanine goes with cytosine. So which means they are complementary, which means they are complementary. Um, these species are complementary. They pair with each other. When we're saying complementary, we are saying they pair with each other. And also another structure, the bases are held together by a weak hydrogen bond, right? A weak hydrogen bond, we're talking about this bond, the bond that binds, right? This bond is the weak hydrogen bond that we're talking about, this bond in between. Because you'll find that in your diagram, they will ask you, name this. That's the weak hydrogen bond that we are talking about. That's the weak hydrogen bond that we are talking about. Right. So we talked about the nucleotides. We talked about is the nitrogenous base joined together by the weak hydrogen bonds to form complementary pairs. So when we are saying complementary pairs, we are saying they pair with each other. Complementary pairs, we are saying they pair with each other. Complementary pairs, we are saying they pair with each other. Right. Now let's move on to the function of DNA. The function. I think we are done with the. Oh, before I forget, we are supposed to talk about also the ladder-like structure. The DNA is a ladder-like structure. Those are the things that you should include also, a ladder-like structure, right? Then let's move on to the functions of DNA. The functions of DNA, right? The first one, we are saying DNA makes up genes which carry DNA make up genes which carry hereditary information. DNA make up genes which carry hereditary information. Right. Number two, DNA contains coded information for protein synthesis. Those are the processes that we will talk about next time. DNA contains coded information about for protein synthesis. So, right, on first point, when we're saying it make up genes which carry hereditary information, in other ways, we are saying the nuclear DNA, it transmits hereditary characteristics. So this is what we are saying. In other words, we are saying it transmits hereditary characteristics. Here, we are saying it transmits hereditary characteristics. So it transmits hereditary characteristics. Right. Then here, DNA contains coded information for protein synthesis. So which means it codes for, we are saying it codes for, this means that it codes because it's coded information. So it codes for the formation. So it codes for the formation, right? It codes for the formation of proteins. So this is basically what we are saying about the DNA. This is basically what we are saying about the DNA. Right. Let's move on our next lesson where we'll be talking about the RNA. Then we'll move on to the process of protein synthesis. We'll move on to the process of protein synthesis, DNA replication. We'll talk about DNA replication. We'll talk about transcription. We'll talk about translation. we talk about, then we move on to the type of questions that are usually asked when we are talking about DNA. We usually focus on past exam papers and see what exactly is being asked. Right, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe and share for more videos. Thank you so much.